Welcome to Constant Variables, a podcast where we take a non-technical look at all things technical. I'm Tim Bornholt. Let's get nerdy. Today we are talking all about growth and scaling with Stephanie Scheller of Growth Disrupt. In this episode, we discuss the first steps you should take when thinking about growing your business, how to decide what parts of the business to focus on, how to properly use outsourcing to scale, and my personal favorite part, when you should start incorporating custom software as part of your scaling dreams. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Stephanie Scheller. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim. I'm excited. We just had a blast chatting just now. This whole podcast is just going to be on fire.
and just the fact we were nerding out about microphones, and you could just tell the way that you responded with your mobile Britney Spears microphone of being able to pace back and forth versus my intro where I'm seated. Your energy is going to definitely help propel this conversation to the next level.
I'm totally down. You know, there's funny. I did a podcast the other day where the guy was like, I've only had one cup of coffee. I'm not at my normal height. And I was like, dude, I don't even drink coffee and I still hit this level of energy.
Me neither. Yeah, I'm not a coffee drinker either, and it seems like like we're the people that bring in the jumping jacks into the conversation. It's like we're able to just bring the energy without needing any performance enhancing drugs here.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm so borrowing that. I'm like, yeah, I don't need the performance enhancing drugs anymore. I'm good. I got past that.
No way. Well, we won't need any asterisks in our name in the Hall of Fame. So today we're talking all about scale and growth, and who better to bring on the podcast than someone that owns a company called Grow Disrupt? Why don't you tell us about, before we get started, talk about Grow Disrupt and what you do to help businesses that are looking to grow.
Yeah. So Grow Disrupt has gone through like all these evolutions, right? I had someone ask me the other day, they're like, have you ever had to rebrand your company? I was like, oh my God, yes. Like when we started the company
every month,
right? Oh, yeah. There was a period where yes, that was legit the answer. But when we started the company, the focus was sales training. So it was actually a sales training business, and we just used Scheller Enterprises, my last name, because I was trying to get the business started quickly and I didn't have time to come up with something clever. So, we went with basics. And I did. We built the company very quickly. We built it up to be the largest, most active sales training practice in Central Texas, like within 13 months. Built it really fast. And there was like this one day where one of my trainers came to me at the end of we had a 2-day boot camp that we would do. And one of the trainers that did the boot camp with me came to me and said, Stephanie, could I work with some of the business owners too? And I was like, what? And she goes, well, there's really two groups of people that come to these boot camps. We have the sales reps that work at another company. And then you have like the small business owners who are trying to do their own, business, and they're building their sales process for their company. And whenever we go out into the audience to work with the individual, like you always assign me to work with the sales reps, but I love working with small business owners. Could I work with them too sometimes? And I just had this like aha moment of, oh my gosh, where I get excited and passionate about is helping small business owners, and not just with sales. Like it's looking at how do you holistically create growth? What are the key areas that you have to approach to create real growth in your business? And we have to look at how are we doing this differently than the majority of the world, because the majority of the world isn't managing to stay in business past 5 years in business. So we need to disrupt the way we grow our businesses to create real, true growth and scalability. And so that was how Grow Disrupt came about. And so now we do events. We put on events online and offline where we bring together the experts that actually know what they're doing and are currently doing it in business, right? So I don't want to talk to someone who built a business 20 years ago. The people who are currently active know what's going on in our economic climate, and we bring them in to be the experts and help small business owners get the tools they need to create a stable foundation for a business that can really produce ROI on both time and money.
And that's perfect for what we're talking about today with scaling and growing. And I know, like I was saying beforehand, I think probably part of this is going to be half therapy session for myself and my own business. But I do think that there's a lot of people. I always like to say, building mobile apps, you can't really build a mobile app without building a business around it. So I think it's really important to consider all of the business side of all the cool technology that we could build. At the end of the day, app development's expensive, so you need to make money. So you have to kind of focus on the business side of it. So, I wanted to start our conversation talking about, where can people even get started with thinking about growing? So just laying out a scenario here. I'm a business owner, been working for a couple of years, got maybe a couple of people working for me, but we have our what we're building kind of down. We have some processes maybe in place. I know I want to grow, but how do you even get started thinking about that? It's so like such a broad topic. Where do you even focus people down to get started with learning where to grow?
Yeah. So we always start people, and this sounds so basic, but if you bear with me for like just a second, it'll make more sense. So we always start with where do you want to grow to, right? So people come, I want to grow, Steph. Okay. How big do you want to get? What do you want? Like, what do you need to fix in the business, right? So a lot of business owners are either taking a paycheck or they're taking profit distributions, right? They're using their profit distributions as their paycheck. They're not actually getting paid for the work they do in the business, or, they're getting a paycheck, but there's no real profits left, right? They kind of assume that because they're getting a paycheck, that's what they get, right? And then they're working crazy hours. They're working too many jobs in the business. They're not thinking about where they need to be in 10 years, like how big they want, or if they've thought about it, in this capacity of like, it would be really cool to be there, but let's be real, right? Let's be frank. Let's be realistic. I hate that term because it's like, you know what? You can build whatever business you want. You can build as big as you want. And people shy away from growth because they're scared of having to hire people and getting screwed over. But done the right way, it's not a problem. So you got to create some serious clarity on what are you building? How big is this business going to be? I mean, what's the geographic range are we talking about? Like, do you want to be the go-to guy across the whole globe? Or do you want to be the go-to guy across the US, or just in Minnesota, or just in your hometown, right? Or do you want to be like and what do you want to be the go-to guy for? And what does your role in the business need to look like when you get to this level? Because right now, I pretty much guarantee any business owner that's looking at how do I grow or scale, I can pretty much guarantee every single one of them is doing stuff they don't want to be doing for the business. They would love to take that stuff off their plate, but they can't afford to hire. They can't afford. So they're sitting here and they are doing the work. So what do you want to be doing? What would your ideal role look like? And don't come at this from the perspective of, well, nobody but me can really do this. Come at this from the perspective of like, I love doing this stuff. I get juiced when I get to work on this stuff, right? That's where that's the end goal for you and your business. And then how much money do you want to make? How much time do you want to be working, right? You can build a business where you're still active in the business and working in the business, but you can take 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks off a year, and really true vacation. So getting that clarity, like when you start digging down, most people have they have kind of this nebulous idea of where they want to grow, but they haven't really put it down on paper in detail. This is what we're creating.
There's a lot of parallels too with like when we're building out apps. A lot of times people come to us and they're like, I have this idea, and the idea is in their head and it's not really there. It's like a rough, they had a problem and they wanted an app to solve it. But then when you really dig down into it and you get into the nitty gritty, because that's what we have to do when we're actually going to build it. It always comes down to, I didn't even think about that, or there's this component to it. And it becomes, there's so much more to solve than just what you originally had thought. And I would imagine there's some parallels there with business owners of, you probably are, if you're running a law firm, you're probably a really good lawyer. But do you also think about like staying up to date with your state employment, insurance practices? And do you think about like all the other weird little nuanced things that come up as a business owner? You probably don't.
No, that's a perfect analogy. And that's exactly Like that's exactly what happens is they sit here and they're like, well, I want to build, and I'll talk to people who are like, well, I want to build $1 billion business. I'm like, great. So, what business do you know that's $1 billion business? Oh, well, Coca-Cola. No. Coca-Cola is a multi-billion dollar business. Find me $1 billion. I want you to look for a business that's the size you want to build. And I want you to figure out what your business is going to need to look like. Right. Because all of a sudden it creates this reality check of like everyone, not everyone wants to build but I talk to people all the time. Oh, I want to build $1 billion business. I'm like, yeah, but you need to get some clarity on what that $1 billion business looks like. Right. And would you actually be happy running that business? Because you may not be. And if that's the case, why, if you're trying to build something you're going to hate, you're going to self-sabotage.
Oh yeah, totally. And yeah, that's a really great point is a lot of times, you kind of get like some survivorship bias in this too, of like, you look at some businesses that are like $1 billion businesses and you can look at them and say like, well, that's what I want to be because that's where all the VC money goes to, or that's where all the success, all the fame and the press and everything goes to. But if you really look at a working company that's actually putting out product and making $1 billion a year, it's like I look at some of those businesses and it's like that looks like an absolute nightmare. But conversely, some people look at that and say that's my dream. So yeah, it really does come down to that clarity.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. We call this the vision, right? What are you building? If you go back to the Latin root of the word vision, it's the verb vis, V-I-S, and it means to see. We need to see. Like we human beings have this amazing capability to actually visualize stuff, right? So we need to see what you're building. I want you to describe it to me in so much detail that I could see what your day-to-day life looks like as the owner of this company. That's the level of clarity you need to create if you really want to scale the business. And here's the thing I will throw out there. You may scale your business to the level you can see right now. And when you get there, you may realize it was only a resting point and you still have some more growth to do and you want to scale up. But now you can actually it's kind of like climbing a mountain. And the clouds are kind of thick and you can only see so far ahead when you're building the business. Like sometimes that's where you're at and you can only see to this level. And then when you get there, you can see a little further, right? So that's how you figure out your vision too. But you got to create that whatever level of clarity you can, you got to get that down.
Well, so speaking of clarity and I would say part of that is also like focus of once you figure out what you want, how do you focus on that? I find personally that as a business owner, I can exactly see what you're talking about. And as soon as you start getting, you start to put some clear vision in front of you and you know where you want to go, you kind of almost through osmosis, but it's obviously hard work, but you just kind of look back a year later at what you had written down to where you want to be. And you're like, oh my God, now I'm here. And then, you look ahead and continue to see more issues. But I find that as I get further down the road, the horizons open up farther and there's more options to go down. And so when it comes to focus, what do you advise people do for figuring out if they have a bunch of options that they can choose to go down with their business? You obviously, can't take every fork in the road. But how do you help people decide which area of the business or which goal they should actually focus on? That
is a really good question because you are spot on. And where people will sabotage their growth is going after too many different things. So a couple of things I always remind people, just because you're not going after an opportunity right now doesn't mean you can't go after it later. I mean, people think of this like, I'm traveling this road and there's a fork in a road and I either have the chance to take it or I don't. But, what's actually going on is you're building the road as you travel. So if you decide you want to fork off and go a different direction, you can because you're literally building the road. So you can do it later. You don't have to take advantage of it right now. And so that is one of the first things I tell people. I'm like, look, get a journal, get a project management board somewhere where you're just listing out all these cool ideas you have for what you want to do in the business down the road. I was like, this way it's listed somewhere. You don't have to try and remember it in your head somewhere, waste energy trying to keep it in the back of your head that you want to go this route down the road. Just list it out and move on, get back to what you were working on. And then let's say we're talking to someone who has like 2 opportunities ahead of them and, they don't have a super established business. They're trying to figure out which direction do they really want to go. Because that's another one I'll see a lot, right? What the first one is, I've got an established business and there's this cool opportunity and, I want to go over here. Right. The other one is I don't have an established business and there's like 4 opportunities in front of me and I don't know which one to go for. And I encourage people to start with your personal mission statement. So every single one of us, I am a big believer, there's a reason we're here, right? I'm one of those people that believes in, there's a purpose for each of us. We're not here just on the planet just to live our lives and die. Like, we're impacting people around us all the time, every day. You're here for a reason. Your job is to find out what that reason is. And then the other thing I'll remind them of is when you figure out what your personal mission statement is, you can then figure out how it applies into which of the opportunities in front of you you're most passionate about based on that personal mission statement. And you may have a different mission statement for the company, right? Because you and the company are not the same entity. And that is one mindset thing that people have to get over in order to really grow their business. You and the company are not the same thing. You and the company are like a Venn diagram. You have some overlap, but you each have your own, your own circles too. And so you have your own mission statement. Figure out what that is, and I tell people to do the exercise of 5 whys. So you ask yourself, if there was one thing I could change on this planet, what would it be? And it needs to be personal, right? So don't give me any BS answers of, I would create world peace. Like, unless that really matters to you, I don't want to hear it. And so what is the one thing you would change? And then you start asking yourself, okay, well, why is that the thing? Like, why would I change that? Okay. So once you get that answer, then you go, okay, well, why does that answer matter to me? Why does that answer matter to me? And you keep going, right? Each answer you get, well, why does that, until you get to at least 5 or until you're like stuck beyond, like you're like, that is the answer. Okay. Then that's your personal mission statement, right? So my personal mission statement is to inspire others to recognize the power of personal choice. My company's mission statement is to disrupt the way the world does business. But we realized that my mission statement to empower others to realize they have personal choice. A lot of small business owners don't feel like they have a lot of choices in the business. They feel like the business is kind of running their life. They just have to do whatever the business tells them to do to keep it alive. And so our goal is if we can change how people think about and run their business, my personal mission statement gets fulfilled as well, because now they feel like they have choice. So look at what your personal mission statement is to bring this full circle here. What's your personal mission statement? And then look at which of the opportunities in front of you seems to fulfill that mission statement most for you. And then go with that one.
And again, it goes back to having that vision and having that personal statement down. And then once you have, kind of your values laid out ahead of you, then maybe that will make the decision a little easier for which path you should focus down. And like you said, I think it's important to focus on like one thing, and you can always come back to it. Because like, again, not to, I keep bringing everything back to building apps, but I guess that's kind of my job. When we're building out software, it does kind of feel like we're building the plane as we're flying in it, or like changing the tire on the car as we're driving down the freeway going 90 an hour. And so I think it is important to realize that one of my favorite quotes is there's a Steve Jobs quote of how life is a lot better when you realize that everything around you is made up by people that are no smarter than you. And I think it kind of goes along that same track of like you in fulfilling your personal goal of helping people make personal choice. It's like we can all decide if something is not the right way. You can always come back and fix it later. If you accidentally chose to go down one path when you focused on one thing, you can always come back to a different thing later. There's, most of the time, just like you rebranded your business so many times, it's like, who cares? It's like, if that didn't work out, start the next thing and move on and see what happens.
Very little in life or in business is absolute. Like there's very little that you're going to put out there. And most of the time, here's the thing. I know people who panic because they're like, well, what if it goes viral? What if it goes massive? I'm like, yeah, the stuff that goes viral didn't go viral by accident. And it didn't go viral overnight. Like you look at everyone's like, oh my God, but the Instagram story, those guys, it just blew up. I'm like, yeah, after years of them experimenting and figuring out what they wanted to do. And of course, the Instagram app itself did, but how many apps did they have before that?
Right.
Right. This is not like, and that's the thing. People are like panicked to make decisions because they're afraid they're going to be stuck. And it's like, you're very rarely stuck. Like, make a decision, move forward. And here's what I tell people: commit to it for a minimum of 90 days and really commit, like put the energy in to make it happen. And at the end of 90 days, if you're not feeling it and you're not liking it, then, you can make a shift, but you're not stuck, right? If I'd waited to figure out exactly what business I wanted to open, I wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be making the impact. We wouldn't be putting on the events we're putting on, because I never would have taken that step. There's a quote I love. I think it's from Zig Ziglar. And he says, what you get by achieving your goal is nowhere near as important as what you get by reaching for your goal.
I love that.
It's this concept of like, as you move towards your goal, you're going to grow, right? The clouds peel back and you can see more and you can shift direction, and that's fine. But you gotta have a direction you're going, and you gotta commit to it and move forward.
Exactly. One thing we were talking again to bring it back to like how do we grow and how do we scale? One thing that you had talked about was outsourcing and hiring other people and all of that stuff. How do you think about using outsourcing as a way to scale? And kind of a tail on question to that is, what should I be outsourcing as part of my business?
Yeah, good questions. Because when I first started my business, my coach would tell me this quote all the time. He said, Stephanie, there's an old African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I would always kind of smile and like in my head be like, I'm going to go fast and far alone. Like, I don't need a team. I was the kid in school that hated team projects. Like, I would literally assign work out to everyone on the team project, and then I would duplicate all their work. I'd have everyone send their work to me, and I'd be the person who would put it all together at the end so that I could just use what I put together instead of what they did. Like, I'm such a control freak, and I did not trust people. And so for years I was, how long it took me, started the business in May. I didn't hire anybody until February. I mean, like, I didn't hire anybody, not even like part-timers, nothing. I didn't hire a single person until February the next year. So almost a year of not doing anything. And even when I hired someone, I wasn't really leaning on them. I wasn't really trusting them. And part of it is, I have this idea in my head that I'm going to hire people and I'm just going to have to go back and redo everything. So why bother? Right. Or, by the time I explain it to someone, I can just do it myself. And the problem, I think, for a lot of business owners is we are pretty freaking competent. Like, we're good at a lot of stuff. And that actually ends up like sabotaging us. A friend of mine was hanging out with Richard Branson, and he told me, he said the most impactful thing that Richard said the entire weekend was that the reason I was able to grow my businesses like I did is because I'm ADD and I'm dyslexic. I literally could not do most of the stuff that was needed to grow the business. I did it for a day or two so that I could get a grasp on it, but it just didn't make sense for me to keep doing it. So I had to outsource. And I think that's really key. So then to get into the actual, okay, how do we actually outsource type of thing? Because this is where people panic and they're like, I don't want to outsource, right? So I tell people it's a matching game. And there's actually 4 things that you have to find the perfect intersection between these 4 things. And until you do, most people are only looking for the intersection between 2 things. And then they wonder why, 50% of their hires don't work. Well, it's because they're only sorting out 50% of the hiring process. So you have to find the right person. So that's the first key, for the right role, right? So they have to be decent or competent or great at the role that you're hiring them to do. But you also have to find the right person for the right company. So now you have to find the right person for the right company that gets along with your culture, that understands and is excited about your mission and your vision, and is, passionate and fired up about these 2 things, but is also good at their role. And on top of that, 4th connection, you have to find the right person for the right manager. So, everyone has their own style of management and leadership, and your style of management may not work for that person. And so they may have been a great fit for the company, a great fit for the role, but you tried to manage them, you managed them wrong, and they quit. And of course, you're sitting here blaming them for just not being a good person. Well, actually that one was on you. So finding those for that like perfect intersection, the thing is it doesn't happen by accident, but most people, that is their hiring process, is completely like, they're like, I need to hire someone. Guess I'll put an ad out on Craigslist or, what's that site, Upwork, or like, and then they start sitting here and they're like, well, I'm going to hire a virtual assistant and I'm going to put them in charge of these 5 things. They're going to be responsible for managing my calendar. They're going to be responsible for updating our website, and they're going to be responsible for posting to social media. And it's like, well, okay, you just listed out something that is super logical and organized, right? Managing a calendar, followed by something that requires a very specific technical skill, followed by something that requires a very creative brain. You're not going to find someone who can do all 3 of those things. You'd be better off saying, okay, I need help with organizing my calendar. I'm going to hire someone just to keep my calendar organized, and go and hire a VA that you're paying, part-time hours to, like 2 hours a week. It's not a ton of work for them, but they have one task and they're really good at it. Right. And then you go find someone else to do the website or the app design. And then you go find someone else. But that's where like people try and have one person who's going to do a whole bunch of things. And you're trying to find the right person for the right bunch of roles. And then you forget you also have to find the right person for the culture and for you as the manager. And so one role, one person, and then the culture, and then the manager, and it requires you have a plan in advance.
Well, I think you've made really good points. Just, I think as a business owner, it's kind of a rookie mistake to, when you're hiring somebody, you might in your, like the front of your brain, you have like, okay, well, they're going to do the website. They're going to do they're going to do the scheduling of the calendar. They're going to do all this stuff. And you think on the front of your brain, I'm going to find somebody like that. But what you're actually seems like you're trying to do is find yourself, just duplicating exactly yourself in another person. And it kind of like opened our eyes when we brought on somebody full time for the first time, like a few years back. And it was just like, wait a minute, work is actually getting done. Like people actually love doing, these specific tasks.
Right.
Like when we were foolishly doing our own accounting, for like the first couple of years. Cause again, you can't hire an accountant if you don't have any money. It doesn't make sense. But like we were doing it ourselves and it was just miserable, and we found somebody that we could give it to, and they love doing accounting and they were doing a phenomenal job and generating all these reports that we were like, what is this report? This really helps. Like, why weren't we doing this before? And it's like, as soon as you like, I think like that's my thing I've found when it comes to outsourcing or hiring or just getting things off of your plate so you can run the business is, it is really scary at first to like you trust somebody else to get this job done. But it took me so long to think of it from a different perspective of like, you just need to if you find the right role and you actually have like a well scoped out role and you find somebody that does fit those 4 boxes, it's like, it's just life changing for the business, where it's like somebody that is actually fired up about the thing you hate, and that you can get like this person going on a 4-hour, I guess in your case, a 6-hour lecture on like outsourcing.
Right.
Like, like it's like, I wouldn't like doing that, but that's why you're the guest on the podcast now, is because you like are so fired up about that. And when you get somebody that's working for you, that's how you can actually go far together as opposed to going fast by yourself.
Right. And the thing is, when you start going far, together, or you build momentum and you start going fast as a group, but like that really is the key. And the thing is like I said, it can't be accidental. You have to have a plan for this. You have to say, like you said, right? You need to figure out what exactly are we hiring for, right? You need that job description that is detailed, that's organized, that explains exactly what they're responsible for. You need a job ad that's going to appeal to the kind of person you want to hire. So I'm a huge fan of using, we use DISC assessments for our hiring processes. I'm a huge fan of using DISC for your hiring processes, or some variety of personality assessment, because then you can design, when you know who you want to hire as far as what kind of personality, you can design the job ad that's going to appeal to that person. So that's the first thing you can do to start eliminating a lot of the wasted, people. And then you sit there and you say, okay, so how many interviews do I want to do? What questions do I want to ask? How am I going to find out if this person is a culture fit? Because if I sit here and let's say like on my website is our core values, right? So on Grow Disrupt's website, our company core values are listed there. So if I talk to someone and I'm interviewing them and I'm like, so, integrity is one of our core values. What does integrity mean to you? Right? They're going to give me a really great answer that's going to sound like it's thought out because they've sat there and they've realized that integrity is one of my core values. And so if they've done their research, they may be able to trick me into thinking they're a good culture fit when they're not. So instead, you have to sit there and come up with, okay, so how am I going to find out whether or not integrity matters to this person? So we design all these little, for us, integrity is doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. So we've designed all these little tests inside our hiring process. For example, we'll ask them to send us some information and ask them when they'll send it over by and look to see if they actually get it over by that time frame. We'll do stuff like, we'll ask a question in the first interview and then rephrase it. So it should be a similar answer, but not phrased in a way that it should trigger them to think it's the same question. And we'll ask the same question in a later interview with a different interviewer so that we're checking to see, are they consistent with their answers? Are they being honest or are they making stuff up as they go? Right. And so when you become really clever and really smart about how you're hiring people, suddenly you actually can find someone who's really fired up about that job, accounting, right? Accounting is not my thing either. And so I want to find someone who loves accounting and gets jazzed about it. And I want to find that person who's also a great culture fit. And then for me as their manager, either I'm going to have to hire someone who is kind of like a middle ground, right? Maybe they don't answer to me. Maybe they answer to someone else in the company who's a little bit closer of a personality fit, that I manage that other person, kind of like if I'm on one extreme and they're on another extreme and we have this person in the middle who can communicate well with both of us, right? But you got to look at that is, if this person is a really high D, do I want them, or a really high C, right? In the disc profile, do I want them answering to me when I'm like a 7C? Probably not. But I do have someone in my company who's like a 52C. I could maybe put them in charge of that person. Right. And then that person can answer to me. So I'm still managing them and I'm still communicating, but they're getting managed in the way they need to be managed in order to feel competent and capable and excited about their job while still staying inside what they're great at, which is accounting and details and organization, which is not my strength.
Yeah, and there's so much we could get into
I know, right?
with outsourcing. I think one thing I wanted to cover, changing topics again on you, since we are a tech kind of podcast, I'd be remiss to not spend some time talking about software. Mm-hmm. So, and especially, I mean, when I think of the word scale, maybe it's because I'm so entrenched in software that's the first thing I think of with scale is software. One thing that I find is a lot of times, people will see a problem and they'll go and look for like the silver bullet app solution that's going to solve everything about it. Like, oh, good. Now we have Slack. So that solved all of our team's communication problems. What is your silver bullet app? Is there a silver bullet app that's going to help my business scale and grow?
Well, so the thing is, I actually don't think there is a silver bullet. Like, I think silver bullets are a made up thing, right? There's no, cause a silver bullet kind of has this connotation of being an end all be all fix all, right? But there really isn't one piece of software that is really the end all be all fix all. Like, you got to find the stuff that and I can even say, for us, we use Asana as our project management software, but I know people who hate Asana. So, mm-hmm. what I do think is I think everyone needs a good project management software. They need a scheduling software, right? Even if you're not trying to set sales appointments, maybe you're just trying to set internal appointments. One of the smartest things I did for my team was when they all have a link that is just for them, that allows, it's only an internal link. And if they're stuck on a project, they're stuck on something I've assigned, they can go to that link and they can schedule time with me. And it's like the only link that bypasses all of the other restrictions we put on the calendar. But instead of them having to reach out and saying, Steph, I'm stuck on this project, and me finally getting around to replying to their email 4 hours later, and then us scheduling a meeting that's another 12 hours later, right? They just go to the link, they schedule a meeting that's within the next, 5 hours, 6 hours, and we have the meeting, fix the problem, they can move on. So I think it's about discovering where the breakdowns are in your business and then finding that one piece of software that is a fit for that. So if you're having trouble juggling projects, find the project management software that does work for you. If your accounting sucks, find the accounting software that does work for you. Or you can't keep up with your sales activity, find the CRM that does work for you. But I don't think there's not like one individual software that I think is like the go-to everyone has to have.
Nice. I didn't think you would. So, now, like, you mentioned Asana, we talked Trello. There are so many like prefab solutions out there, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would presume that the first step, if you're going to go solve a problem in your business, would be probably first identify what the problem is and figure out what the process is around that problem, and incorporate some off the shelf component, a tool that's going to let you best solve that problem. But I'm sure that as businesses are growing and scaling, you get to a certain point where, Trello is not going to cut it for your business, or there's going to need to be some sort of customization and custom tooling that's built up around whatever your process is. When should a company start thinking about incorporating custom software into their business?
So, and I don't know what y'all's opinion on this is, but what I tell people is like, don't try and get a custom software unless you like use the software. So let's say, like, I know a guy who's getting a custom built CRM. So they have a very particular type of business, and they're it's almost finished, but it's a custom built CRM. And they were using, they tried Salesforce, they tried HubSpot, they tried a whole bunch of different CRMs. They had one that they were using that worked well-ish, but they were really starting to push the limits of what it was capable of. And what was happening was when they were onboarding a new person, they had customized it so far that there was so much training that had to be done on how to use this software. That is usually a good signal that it's time to get a custom piece of software. When you've had to do so much adjustment and so much work that you have to train people how to use that software, and you can't rely on the automated trainings that the software comes with, that's a really good signal that it's time to get your own piece of software built. But I would say, I don't think the first place to go when you find a problem in the business, the first place to go is not necessarily a custom piece of software. I would look for something that could fill the gap and try it out. Because kind of like you referenced earlier, right? People come to you and they're like, I want an app that can do this. And it's like, well, did you think about this and this and this and this? And until you've actually started to get your hands into it, you don't think about any of that stuff. So where I think is you start with the basic piece, right? And then when you're starting to bust at the seams a little bit and you're getting beyond what that software is capable of, when you've had to, like for him, they were having to rename, like all of the fields were being used for stuff that wasn't what the fields were labeled for. So like they literally had like a legend of how to read their software because nothing was what it was actually labeled as, right? And so that's a really good, at that point you really kind of need a custom designed piece, especially if there's nothing on the market that does what you really do want it to do.
Well, that you make some really good points in there, because we personally in our business, we had for the longest time we had absolutely zero process around our sales activity. It was our system was literally whenever an email came across, whether my partner or I got to it first, whoever got to it was going to handle it, and then from there it was just like the Wild West of like the way that he handled sales and I handled sales. There wasn't even any consistency in that. So there was one day that we like sat down and we just whiteboarded out every single project, that like sales opportunity we had, and we were just like, oh my God, we forgot about this and this, and you just like kind of freak out. It's like you get kind of we figured out our process really quickly after that point, right? Like we moved to a Google Sheet, then we moved to another, we finally built our own software, but it was after we stretched the limits of writing it on a whiteboard, then we stretched the limits of Google Sheets, then we stretched it to, we just kind of got to that point. So yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it is don't go custom immediately, figure out how to stretch the limits of whatever software you're using. And
then when you do start stretching the limits, like don't be afraid to upgrade to that custom solution because think about this. If I'm a big believer that like one of the things I really push to people is your most valuable resource is your energy, not your time, not your money, but your energy. Because you can have time without energy to do anything with it. And you don't actually really have anything of value. So when your customizations, when you're pushing the limits, right, you are wasting so much energy where people are having to remember how to do this and tweak this and push this and all these workarounds, right? And so people get there and they're like, oh my God, but it's so expensive to get custom software. I'm like, yeah, but think about the amount of money you're wasting because you don't have the energy to go after those big clients. Because you're so busy working with your workarounds. Being cheap gets you cheap results in business. Now,
couldn't say it
not
better.
to say you need to be extravagant, but don't be cheap, guys.
There's a line. There's a fine line between building out $1 million custom app versus, you can start again, like everything we've been talking about, like start small and grow from there.
Exactly.
That's the best way that's the best way I've seen to scale. So, well, Stephanie, this has been incredibly, incredibly insightful for me. And I know people are going to take away a lot from this episode. If anybody wants to reach out to you and learn more about you or Grow Disrupt, or they want to take you up on that 6-hour seminar to learn more about outsourcing, where can people find you?
I think the best thing to do is if you go to our website, it's just super simple, growdisrupt.com. We actually have this really cool quiz that we just launched on the site that will actually, if you want to grow your business and you're not sure what to fix, like what do you need to focus on next to like what fire do I put out first? This quiz actually walks you through it. We designed it. This is like a 1.5 years in the making quiz that's been designed to help you figure out exactly what you need, like which fire do I put out first so that I can really grow the business. And it's awesome. But then if you actually want to chat with us, there's tons of resources on the website, free, paid. There's tons of stuff there. And then if you want to chat with me, you want to connect with me, you can do so. I think there's a calendar link on there, but you could also just fill out the contact us, and my team is awesome. They'll get you to meet within like 24 hours.
Nice. That's fantastic. I'm going to take that quiz. It sounds like a fun quiz.
Right? I love it. It's a little bit of a brain tease because you have to really think, but it's so good.
I'm not opposed to thinking a little bit. Here and there.
Here and there. Every once in a while,
Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on.
Man, thank you so much for having me. This was fun, and I love this topic. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Thanks to Stephanie Scheller of Growth Disrupt for joining me today on the podcast. You can find out more about Stephanie and her business by heading to growdisrupt.com. Show notes for this episode can be found at constantvariables.co. You can get in touch with us by emailing hello@constantvariables.co. I'm at Tim Bornholt on Twitter, and the show is at CV_podcast. Today's episode was produced by Jenny Karkowski and edited by the dapper Jordan Daoust. We'd really appreciate it if you took a couple minutes and left us a review on the Apple Podcast app. It shouldn't take much time at all, and it really does help new people find our show. Just head to constantvariables.co/review, and we will link you right to where you need to go. This episode was brought to you by the Jed Mahonis Group. If you're looking for a technical team who can help make sense of mobile software development, give us a shout at jmg.mn.